live on YouTube, and we'll give it a shot over here on the other pages. All right. Okay, so we are up and running live on YouTube. So happy Thursday, gentlemen. How are we doing?
Good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Howdy.
Here we have entered August. We have hit the last couple of weeks of summer here, right? Very good. Very good. Last couple of weeks of the shark summer. Jaws 50th all summer long. And from what I understand, things are still going pretty strong over on the island. So that's good to hear. So awesome. All right. Well, tonight we have a special guest, and we have a gentleman joining us this evening by the name of Paul Downey. Paul, I really want to thank you for coming on and joining us tonight. Not only for just joining us and hanging out, it's the fact that it is what time is it where you're at right now?
It's 20 to 12 at night on a Thursday, and it's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Always happy to talk anything Jaws.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time. So yeah, almost midnight where you're at. So I guarantee I'll be in bed by that point. But Paul, love the vigor and love the attitude. So we are very happy to have you on and have you here. And we got a couple people starting to join us and starting to kind of chime in. We got Val joining us here. He's saying, hello, guys. Hello, Val.
Hey, Val.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us today, bud.
Last week we had Scotland represented. So
that's I was just telling that. He said he actually caught
an international show. That's for sure.
Yeah, he said he caught some of John's video. He said he's going to try and pick up on the rest of it. So very, very cool. Yeah, we have a handful of UK people that are regulars on here. A couple from Scotland, one from Wales. So yeah, very nice.
You just need someone from Ireland now. Then you've kind of got the whole of the UK sphere there.
The whole shebang, right?
Yeah.
I have Connor Chaney on.
Oh, that's right. He is from Ireland. Yeah. Wow. A little bit of everything. We got Australia. Yeah, the UK. We've got a couple of others over in Europe, and then the rest tend to be stateside. But yeah, and you know, one thing I've always go ahead.
You say plus his sister's married to Sean Connery's son.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So you go to that family reunion.
Awesome. So we have quite a few representatives floating around the world. So awesome. So Paul, before we really dive into things, give us, as you and I had a conversation tonight, give us a little bit of a background on your introduction to the whole Jaws world. So how did it happen? When did it happen?
I mean, it's hard to kind of pinpoint, isn't it? Because of age and a lot. I mean, I'm 41 now, but it was always kind of this kind of childhood kind of fascination for me, certainly from watching the first film and then becoming actually interested in sharks as well. So my dad was and still is a little bit. He enjoys fishing, so he always had a bit of knowledge about fish in the ocean and all that kind of stuff. So to have a son that was interested in sharks was he kind of really encouraged that. He'd buy. We used to get these books from the libraries, and it was years ago when they were probably not as censored, so there was these books with really graphic images of shark attack images in them, and you don't tend to see them much anymore. I think there's the odd book out there that's long out of print, and but it was really fascinating as well. And there was two films that, you know, there was two scenes from films that really scared me as a child, like at a very formative age. And it was Jaws, and ironically it was Jaws the Revenge, and it was the two attack scenes. So there was Quint's death, and there was also Sean Brody's death in Jaws the Revenge, which I think we'll probably touch on a bit later, but always kind of left a bit of a mark on me. But it was the whole kind of fascination of this creature actually exists. It's a real thing. It's not like, you know, it's not King Kong, and it's not like, you know, the creature from the Black Lagoon or whatever. Really, this is a real creature in the ocean out there, you know. And then obviously, you know, as a child, you think it's this unstoppable like killing machine, and it's just out there, you know. As Hooper says, you know, to is it eat, mate, and swim, meat, and make little baby sharks, something like that. But you realize there's a lot more to it than that, you know, and you start to like learn more about like other shark films, and for me it was kind of like a bit of a fascination, because I think for me as a child the two big fascinations were sharks and dinosaurs, because I was around that formative age when Jurassic Park came out, so it was very much like my kind of generation's Jaws almost. But obviously both Spielberg, you know, so the connective tissue was there from. And it just astounded me that somebody could make a film that, to me at the time, you know, for watching it when I was very young, have this very realistic, big model shark that can jump out of the ocean and look like it can really attack people. It just leaves such a, and I think when you speak to anyone, no matter how old they are or where they saw it, that film leaves such a mark on you that you never really shake it. And to me, and I know when me and you spoke previously, I said it still is. It's the greatest film ever made. It's never been bettered because it's got everything, you know. And then people are still talking about it and trying to find things about it 50 years later, and that's a rarity in film. You know, there's masterpieces out there, you know, and 70s cinema to me is the pinnacle of cinema. You know, I think you look at that crux of that 10-year period, there's a lot of classics, especially in the horror genre, which is obviously an interest of mine. And them films are constantly imitated. You know, people are still chasing Jaws 50 years later. There's so many winks and nods to Jaws, no matter what, you know, what kind of film it is, you know, whether it's the politics of it or, you know, the monster element or the, you know, the kind of the corruption in a small town, all of that kind of stuff. People are still imitating 50 years later, and that's the power of what was created from the page to the screen. And from that, I always remember the first ever copy I got of Jaws, the Peter Benchley book, and it was at a car boot sale, which is it was like I'm not sure what you call it in America. It's probably the same thing, isn't it? I'm guessing, where basically people will sell their unwanted things just in a car boot. And it was at my the primary school that I went to, and I got Jaws for 25 pence, which is basically it's pennies. It's literally it's nothing really. From a young girl who was the same age as me. We went to school together, and her mum was selling it for 25p, and I couldn't believe my luck, because you know, even as like a small child, you have very little change, and no one's going to think twice by letting like a 7 or 8 year old read Jaws or buy it. And just them first chapters of when you read it, it's the shark's point of view, and that was so unique to read. I'd never read anything like that before. And obviously, you know, because you are kind of used to like very fictional storytelling at that stage. And that just kind of drew me in. And I know there's elements of the book that aren't there in the film. But, and I think when you read it now, like as an adult, you realize that there are things that, you know, were a bit, you know, that you probably couldn't have had in the film, because they probably would have slowed things down. And obviously the ending's a bit contentious. But yeah, it's just it became this like mini obsession. So I think it was around I said it in the book and I can't remember. It was around my 10th or 11th birthday, and Jaws had been out of print in the UK for a while. And my mum managed to get a copy of it on VHS, but we doubled it up so we had. So my birthday present for that year was Jaws and Jaws the Revenge on VHS. And to me, that was like the perfect birthday, because I was like, because they were the only two that I'd seen at that stage. Because again, the other films had gone out of print, so I'd my watching order was Jaws, Jaws the Revenge, Jaws, I think it was 2, and then 3, because they brought them back out again. They re-released them on VHS. So to me, Jaws the Revenge, without obviously this is pre-internet and anything else, that to me was the sequel to Jaws, and because it had Alan Brody in it, it had that connective tissue. But obviously you realize over time that it's the 4th film, and everything else that goes along with it, and then eventually seeing like Jaws 2 and 3, and just it's such a weird and fascinating franchise, and like I say, I think you just don't shake it. You don't shake it at all. It's always with you.
I'm completely fascinated by the fact that you were exposed to Jaws and then Jaws the Revenge, because Jaws 2 and Jaws 3 were not available to you, which, I mean, obviously me being here in the States, that just blows my mind when I think about that, going from 1 to essentially 4, and then perhaps later catching 2 and 3. That's a pretty interesting and unique exposure to it, which shows then, which I completely understand then, how you go from 1 to 4, and you're like, oh, the connectivity is there because you have the same characters, it's the same setting, and so that's really, really very interesting.
Yeah, and I think as well, what we had with television as well, with terrestrial television. So at the time, I think it was four channels, before Sky Television and all that kind of stuff. Is Jaws the Revenge would be the one that would be shown on television the most. So you would always see adverts for it on the BBC around the early 90s, I think it was probably, and then obviously Jaws as well. But the other two were I'm not sure if there was some sort of rights issue or whatever, but they were actually quite hard to get hold of. And I remember there was a friend of mine who lived up the road when I was quite young, and it was at the time when I hadn't seen Jaws 2 yet, and his parents had Jaws 2 on VHS, and I must admit I wanted to steal it. I kept seeing it in their living room, and I thought, if I just just put it in my bag and just will they notice? I didn't. Just for the record.
Paul, were you aware that there was a Jaws 2 and 3 before you saw Jaws Revenge? Because if it was called Jaws 4, then you would say, oh, I might be missing 2. But if it was just Jaws the Revenge, did you know that there was a 2 and 3 before you saw it?
Probably not the first time, or the first few times, I'd say. Yeah, because like I say, it was never called Jaws 4 over here. I think it might have been called that, and maybe that the TV guides or whatever, but it was always Jaws the Revenge. But then obviously when you find out there's a Jaws 2, and I can still remember actually the first time I ever watched Jaws 2, because I'd had a sick day from school, and I was taken round. I had to stay around my auntie and uncle's house, who lived about a mile from where I lived. But Jaws 2, by sheer coincidence, at that point had been on television overnight, and she'd recorded it, and I got to watch, and that's the time I got to watch for the first time on a sick day from school, and I was just mesmerized by this Scarface shark. It was incredible, and it really kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities of the franchise, and it just kind of, and obviously I think for a lot of people, your rankings of the series probably usually goes 1, 2, and then 3 and 4 are probably interchangeable with a lot of people.
Very nice. I do have a couple people just kind of chiming in, saying hello. We got our good friend Victor from Canada is chiming in, saying greetings, Paul. Janie saying hello as well. And we've got, let's see what else we got here. We got Robert chiming in. He's our Scottish friend. Good to see Robert on here. And Jenny is saying, best way to spend a sick day, sitting watching Jaws. Nothing wrong with that, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we do have, so you're an author. You actually wrote a book on the story of Jaws the Revenge. So can you give us, I don't know, I don't want to say a little bit of background, but what was your main motivation? Because obviously your enjoyment for this went way beyond just simply sitting and watching the film. You felt compelled to tell the story, to give some background? What was your big motivation with that one?
I think it was kind of like it was a snowball of kind of opportunities that came up. So around I think it was around 2017. So I did an interview with Mitchell Anderson, who plays Sean Brody, for a magazine that was based here in the UK, and it ended up being like a cover story, and it was a nice deal for me at the time because it was just like a nice little bit of a freelance gig, and from speaking to him, it kind of opened a few like doors in terms of like, oh, there's what more is there to tell? I'd done a little bit of research in it, and then a couple of years went by, and I started co-writing a book around the 1974 film Black Christmas, and with another author. But we had access to like old media archives and things like this. Because it was a co-author job, it was kind of split into parts. So a lot of my stuff was done up front. So I had a bit, not downtime, but during the proofing stage, we still had access to all these archives. So curiosity got the better of me, and I started looking into Jaws: The Revenge, and I almost started like piecing together this timeline almost of what I would like want to hear about, what I can find out about, and then start to put the jigsaw pieces together. And I used a similar format to Black Christmas, where we do like almost like the nucleus of it. Pre-production, production, interviews with the cast where possible, the kind of legacy, and then and a few other things in between. And it was, it took a bit of time in terms of like getting the right people involved. But I think in terms of the motivation of it is obviously we've had books based around the other Jaws films. Obviously, Mike, your book on Jaws 2 is fantastic. So I'd already read that at that stage as well, and and from just putting out like kind of tentative interest, there seemed to be an audience to want to know about the film. Whether it's morbid curiosity about because obviously it's this notoriously bad film, or it was people who were genuinely fans of this film. And for me, for years it was always the words guilty pleasure, but then it just kind of like. No, I just kind of had a bit of fun with it, and it always kind of it has these moments that I think we'll probably touch on a few in a bit that do really work, and there's a lot that doesn't work, obviously, but I think sometimes they're the more interesting films to talk about. The ones that they're almost like these. They could have been great. But whether it was incompetence or things not working or things going wrong, whatever, or a mix of all three or and more. It just made for this really interesting story, and there was a lot of material out there. There was so much material about the kind of the ideas behind it, the production, the script and what they wanted and what they ended up getting, and it became this really interesting story to me anyway. And I think they always say that obviously, the first person you should please when you're writing is probably yourself. And then obviously if you're happy with the story, then hopefully it can reach a wider audience. And I found that the more I started going through things and getting interest and actually getting people to talk about that had never talked about it at all, that I could ever find, it just became this really interesting project that I just couldn't shake really, and for the best part of a year I was kind of badgering away with it, and luckily it kind of fell in a similar time frame to when the Black Christmas book came out. So I think they were about 7 or 8 months apart in the end, because I was almost kind of working on them simultaneously. But it was very much, this one was obviously a solo project for me, so it was kind of, there was a lot more work for me to do, but obviously I'd found that buzz and that passion for it, so I just went all in on it.
Cool. Nice.
Very nice. One thing, unfortunately, I feel like has always shortchanged a lot of the Jaws movies, including at times part of the original, was the fact that every movie you hear the same thing. No script was ready. Everything had to be done on set. And, at least, I don't even, possibly 2, but at least 3 and 4, Universal was not doing well. And so they were looking to the Jaws franchise as a possible bailout. And unfortunately, I really look at that as a setup for failure. I really do, where you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and this has to work, but yet no preparation, no nothing. Quick, grab someone to produce it and direct it. Quick, come up with an idea, what you're going to do, and put a script together while you're shooting. And it really doesn't. I really feel like there was a real injustice served at times because of that. I really do. And it seems to be a resounding thing from Jaws to 2 to 3 to 4. There was never scripts ready. I mean, people were pulled, whether it was Spielberg, whether it was, Janot, I mean, regardless. I mean, they were literally doing it while they were shooting the film. And that to me just blows my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we can probably debate this, Mike. Which do you think is the more chaotic production, Jaws 2 or Jaws the Revenge?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I'd say 2.
Really.
There was so much riding on it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. The documentary that I watched on the Blu-ray for 2, and I didn't know any of that, and this is obviously pre me reading your book as well, and I was like, this is absolute chaos. How did it end up being, to me, like this really entertaining, cohesive film? Because it shouldn't work. For all these things that are going wrong between, well, you can go into it all. Between John Hancock losing his job and the whole Roy Scheider of it all. It's bizarre, and whereas you'd like to think that by the time they got to 4, they may have learned their lesson, but nope.
Same thing. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think when you get to 4 though, sorry, Mike.
I'm sorry,
Mike.
They might do their best work under pressure too. When you're under the gun like that with everybody watching you, because Spielberg thought he's going to get on Jaws, thought he was going to get fired every day. The pressure was immense, and then with John and then Janot coming in and having so little time to take over and dealing with Scheider and everything else. I mean, I always say if Jaws 2 had been called anything else but something Jaws anything, it would have gotten a much better shake when it came out. And now it's much more appreciated, and people realize that it's a good standalone film. But it's by comparison. Michael, Bad is a great album, but people tell you it's not a thriller. So sometimes you just.
That's a really good comparison.
You hit so high so early, it's just hard to keep it up.
Sure.
And I think as well, like you say, because you've got Spielberg there, and Spielberg, pulled it out of the bag with Jaws, obviously with all this chaos. But obviously, in terms of, and no disrespect to any of the other directors who were there, but there's obviously he was building up to this point when he basically was going to end up being this massive director who could take on these massive projects and turn them around and make these classic films. And I find the directing choices, especially with Joe Sargent. Joe Sargent wasn't a big director. His biggest film, I think, before Revenge was 14 years prior, ironically with Robert Shaw for the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. But
sure.
really good film,
incredible film. Yeah.
But between that, it's really slim picking. So I think, like you say, because of the rushed nature of everything, like say a 9-month window between Sid basically approaching Lorraine Gary to come back to being effectively in cinemas, and that it just blows my mind.
And also going back to the directors, now, because John Hancock told me if he knew that Steven Spielberg was going to become Steven Spielberg, he never would have taken the job. And I'm sure by the time, they offered Jaws Revenge to a lot of other directors, but you just don't want to be compared to the original.
To the original, sure. Yeah.
I think it's interesting though, isn't it? Because I think now the way that like the sequel, almost like the conversation around sequels is that then I think people are a bit less. I don't know what the correct phrase is. Maybe less like snobby towards maybe taking on like a sequel that's a 5 or a 6, or a 6 or a 7 at this stage, because obviously IP is so far along. Like obviously you've got the superhero ones that just keep on going, that you could say, oh yeah, you're technically directing whatever 7, but it doesn't matter because you've got that IP. And I think Jaws as well, when you look at it, obviously Jaws 2 is considered one of the first big Hollywood sequels, isn't it? I think
Sure.
It's kind of almost one of the original IPs that ends up getting strung out and basically run into the ground within, God, I mean, it's like 12 years. It's mad when you think about it, because usually franchises can have like a healthy break between films and still run that, like obviously Star Wars keeps coming back and all these other kind of franchises. But to end Jaws there, I always did wonder, especially being, an impressionable, child, teenager, whatever. I always thought, why did they never do another Jaws? Did it really sink the franchise that badly? And obviously looking at from what happened, and yeah, it kind of did.
Well, too, you bring up a good point. When you look into the time of sequels, so you had Jaws 2, you had which was done well and it did fairly well. You had things like the second Smokey and the Bandit, which is right around that time period. You had The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, you had some serious follow-ups. And yeah, sure. And so I almost look at that as, people often dismiss Jaws as Jaws got ripped off and didn't earn any awards when it came out. But if you look at what it was up against and you look at the other films that were competing, I almost wonder if it was a time essence or a time factor as much as it was, the film itself. I mean, I really do. Yeah. So, all right, we do have a couple of comments here just to pull up here. So Janie's chiming in saying sometimes the best creativity comes out of chaos. Because you're backed into a corner, you have to figure out a solution to make these films work, which very evident in a lot of these films that we're talking about here. Yeah. And Robert's saying, and then there's a so-called 5th film from Italy. Actually makes Jaws Revenge look great. Yes. In fact, so much so that it was sued by Universal, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Cruel Jaws?
I think I've seen it.
Yeah. Cruel Jaws, yeah.
Cruel Jaws was actually sued, by Universal, because I mean they even pulled some of the actual live action shark sequences into the movie. I mean, it was very very, very, very obvious. Yes. Yeah. And then Val says, remember, as they say, the only sequel that loses money is the last one. Yeah. And it's well known that, you have lightning in a bottle and it strikes and it hits and it's magic. So where are you going to go from there? You're not going to top that. People talk about a Jaws remake. I'm sorry. It's not going to have that magic. Am I going to put my money down and go see it? Oh, you're damn right. But it's not going to have that magic. And I know going into it because it's already been done, So, but yeah.
And most sequels, I mean, there's a few exceptions. I think the Marvel films are an exception, but most of the Jurassic Parks and the Fast and the Furious, it's the same formula, just in a different location. Now we got these dinosaurs to worry about, or now we got to drive these cars fast. There's not a lot of, creativity in Hollywood anymore, and that's sad. One of the, as I got more into Jaws 2, one of the original ideas for the Jaws 2 book was to comment on the sequelization of Hollywood, and I think by the time I had put it out, that like the top 10 films were all either sequels or the tentpole films that spawned sequels, with the exception of Titanic, which I'm surprised there hasn't been a sequel to that. I'm sure they find Jack's frozen body somewhere and they bring him back to life or something. But it's sequels are you already own the property. Usually, in the case of Jaws 2 with Roy Scheider, and, they already had him under contract after Jaws, so they kind of had him over a barrel. And there's an old interview with him that I did when in New York City in early, I think, '81. That he said that they signed him because if they do a sequel, they've already got him under contract at a set price. If you become a star, they have you to do the next film at a set price. So it's all, sadly, it's all about money. I agree with Paul that the 70s filmmaking was probably the last great decade where it wasn't about money and finance, and it was just about whatever the art you put on the screen.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a real creative streak that runs through. There's so many. I mean, like going back to Roy Scheider, obviously with the French Connection, and Exorcist, Omen, Alien, Halloween, Jaws. They're all in this 10-year period, and they're all films that people are still chasing today. And I think it's interesting with the conversation around Jaws is that would the series have continued longer beyond like a 4-film format if they would have gone a completely different format? I know 2 is a different film, but obviously you are still an amateur. It's whether you completely take it off the island and you do another shark story somewhere else, or you do the Indianapolis story, like I know it was suggested with Spielberg, but tentatively or not. But obviously, I know 3 is an attempt to move away from it, but obviously have that Brody connectivity. But
familiar setting, it's where people are used to going.
I think as well, though.
I think Halloween 3 kind of put a damper on that idea, though, because it was which I like Halloween 3, but it's exception of they just slapped the Halloween title on it. And a lot of people went in expecting one thing and got another thing, and they probably didn't appreciate the film they had because they kept waiting for Michael Myers to jump out. So that's just it. With the Jaws franchise, they'd have to, find some kind of familiarity to link them all together.
Do you feel that Jaws 3 is almost like the Halloween 3 of the series? The comments I get the most about it, because people have said to me, "Oh, why didn't you write about Jaws 3?" And to me, it's probably my least favorite. It doesn't feel like it's in the same universe as the other 3. I don't know if that's just the characters or the settings or whatever. It feels like it's of a different series to me. It just feel the same, and I don't know if that's just me just being a bit weird.
It does. It's not just
I agree.
Besides the different location, the Brody boys are much older than they should have been. The 5-year difference, that's kind of jarring that Mike went from 17-year-old to 30-year-old Dennis Quaid. So yeah, I do though. I do liken that to Jaws 3 to Halloween 3.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, got a comment or two regarding that. So Robert's saying, Spielberg, so they talked about doing a Jaws 3 as a parody. It was like Jaws 3 People Zero, and Spielberg threatened to walk away from everything entirely, and so they were forced to come up with something completely different. And what they produced was yet different from the original story. I believe the story was that a shark went up a river and got into a lake, and they had, roles written for specific people, and they gave it a go. They really did. And Joe Alves did his best. They threw it in his lap and said, "Here, what can you do with it?" But yeah, I do agree. It is very far removed from the other 3 movies. Yeah.
And I feel like, and I don't know whether this is true or not, because my knowledge of Jaws 3 is probably is the lowest of the 4, is that I feel bad for Joe Alves in the sense that I feel like it was a project that he was never going to win at. He was fed to the wolves a little bit by Universal. Obviously, you want to maybe take that step up and want to, direct, in a Jaws series, a real, like I say, a tentpole franchise. But at the same time, if it doesn't work out, it stops. It could stop you dead in your tracks. It almost like blacklists you from ever doing it again. And obviously the experience might just put you off as well. You might just think, oh no, this just isn't worth it, you know?
Yeah. And I really do think that that's what happened to Joe. I think Joe possibly had a shot at doing more than what he did. But there again, I almost think he was not set up for failure, but it was thrown in his lap. Make this work. He did some amazing scenes. You know, the scene where the shark comes and breaks through the control room. That scene, I mean, you know, not so much the shark. I know everyone always gripes about how bad it looks, but the actual scene of the people in that reacting in that room filling up with water was pretty amazing when you know, and groundbreaking when you think about it. The scene of the one guy who was being eaten from inside the mouth of the shark. To this day, I'm sorry, that's an amazing scene. That just blows your mind. And so I think if he was given maybe more of a fair chance to kind of work and develop things, I think he would have maybe done things a little bit different. And credit to Joe. I mean, really, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, I do wonder if he was almost ruled over, because as much as, you know, obviously Zanuck and Brown were you know, over the franchise, you know, certainly them I'm pretty sure they were involved up until 3. I don't know whether they had an overbearing influence maybe on 3 or with it. I mean, if they're not involved, I look like an idiot right now. But I thought from the Jaws 2 stories, the way that they kind of they felt like they meddled. And if that was the case with 3, then I'm like, yeah, it's a real tricky one. And it's a shame because, you know, like, I mean, I've heard, you know, the stories like about Joe Dante potentially doing it, and you know, and Joe Dante, I like a lot of Joe Dante stuff. I think there's his kind of style probably leans a bit more on humor that might have not sat well with maybe more serious Jaws films. I don't know, you know, but obviously if they were going to go full blown comedy, yeah, who knows?
Do a few comments I want to throw up here real quick relevant to what we're talking about it. So so we have Jane saying it doesn't really fit. No offense to Joe, but the rest of the films have the Amity connection. It's, you know, I do think it's one of the things that kind of removed it. So Jaws 3 is underrated in my opinion, and great point of view death scene. Yeah, from inside the shark's mouth. And Bess Armstrong had a great performance. Yeah, there were a couple of really good performances here. We have Lou Gossett Jr. Good performance, you know. I love when he says, listen, nephew. Yeah. I mean, really, I mean, he throws some attitude in there. So, yeah. What else do we have? Joe Alves didn't seem to want to discuss it at the 50th. I'm sure he didn't. But when you see him at times, he shows up with his 3D jacket on still, which is really interesting. So he's got to have a little bit of you know, being proud of the fact that he did that. And so, you know, more power to him. By the way, Jaws Revenge made $50 million worldwide in 87, equivalent to $144 million today. Well, speaking of Jaws Revenge, let's kind of dive a little bit into some of this. What do you think? Sound like a plan here, guys?
Yeah.
So you sent me a couple images, and I thought I'd bring those up, Paul. And they were images that were obviously important to you. And so on top of the images here, I did happen to grab a clip or two. So here are 2 images which honestly really stand out as a great scene for me. A couple of reasons. Number one, they were shot right there in Edgartown, you know, Martha's Vineyard. Number 2, I thought they were very good graphic scenes. I mean, really get your attention and show that personal, you know, connection. You know, Sean being attacked, you know, him dying in the harbor while the kids are singing holiday hymns, you know, right there at the ferry. And then, unfortunately, Ellen having to go and claim Sean and identify the body. So really, really powerful scenes, without a doubt. Yeah. So let me pull that clip up here, and we'll watch part of the clip anyway. I try and keep the clips to a certain time, and then we'll come back and kind of hit on that a little bit. All right. All right. Let me pull that out. And I kind of cut it right there. And there's two. First of all, Janie, hello. Thanks for coming in
Hey,
and joining
sorry.
us.
Yeah,
So-
I'm just sorry. I'm just now hopping on. I apologize.
No, quite all right. Two things that really stand out for me there. Number one is when he finally goes under in the middle of yelling. That is very reminiscent of Chrissy, because the exact same thing happened to her. And number two, which I cut it out on account of time, what gets me about that scene is not just the attack, it's the log. Because if you remember, when he came in, it was that pylon that was stuck. He was trying to get it out. And in the end, what surfaces but that battered pylon comes up at the very end of pylon. Yeah, and that's what gets me. I'm like, that was a powerful scene. Yeah. Really well done scene. Yeah.
That kind of comes back, and I don't mean to interrupt, but that kind of comes back to where if you look at Michael, when he's growing up, he's on the beach walking with his wife, and he goes, it was a piece of wood. It was a shitty piece of wood. And look what's happened. So, it comes back. I had to jump on to say something.
Sure.
About the Jaws 3 thing, because it came into my brain. It's like, I don't have enough time to type this. But I think if you look at it, it's not that it was really a failure. It is kind of like a cult classic now, but it didn't have the elements of the main characters. It was the first Jaws film to kind of come into the franchise that did not have. You didn't have Brody. You didn't have Hooper. We certainly didn't have Quint. So that element was gone. And so when they take it to Orlando, nobody wanted to be around. It's just not there. That spark of the trilogy of those men are not there, and that may have been why nobody liked it. No, it's just my thought.
Well,
makes sense.
And then there was Dennis Quaid, who admittedly forgets most of the movie because he was quite tight into certain substances. So every scene he was like, you saw the sweat stains, and he's mad. He's like, that
was the Florida weather in Orlando. Okay, that had nothing to do.
Janie, you and I grew up in Florida. Janie, you and I grew up in Florida. We never sweated like that. So
it could have been hot those days, Mike. I'm just saying.
From the jet ski to he's in the boat. And he's like sprinting across the sand, grabbing the microphone. Oh, get out of the water! Like you see, like the people are just like bing, dilated.
Well, I get like that when I have Starbucks. I mean, so what's the big deal? So, by the way, I'm the one that has no filter, just to let you know. So, yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry. No, I won't cast any dispersions on the on the capacities of Dennis Quaid during Jaws 3D.
He seems to take it in stride. I mean, he doesn't sit there and necessarily have in-depth conversations, but he admits that, like, well, that's what I was going through at the time, and was what it was. So,
I mean, yeah.
Paul, question for you: how accessible were the cast and crew when you were writing your book? Were they easy to get a hold of and talk to? Were some tougher than others?
I think there was a bit of a mix. So Mitchell was the first person that I spoke to. Who obviously we'd just seen the scene of, and again he hadn't really talked about it that much in the interlude years, because it kind of like it was almost like it was in terms of like profile, it was probably one of the highest points of his career, because he was a television actor mainly, and then Lance, I talked to him, and me and Lance ended up talking for over an hour on a Skype call, and it was such a lovely conversation as well, because he was just he understands the issues that come with the film, but he's at a point in his life where he rolls with it, and he does the conventions. He gets it, and Lorraine was someone who I always wanted to talk to personally. I just wanted just to talk to, never mind for a book. I just wanted to know what it was like without knowing about the politics of Hollywood and everything else that kind of came with it. Just because I found it quite fascinating at the time, especially from that point of when, like I say, when I had Jaws and I had Jaws the Revenge, she became almost like this final woman, essentially, in terms of that film. and and as a woman who was over 50 years old at the time, it was quite unique in that space, and something that was always quite fascinating. And obviously she's very 80s looking. She admits she had the shoulder pads on all the way through and on all this kind of stuff.
Oh, that was the style, because I wore those too. So you could. That was the era, sadly.
It really was. It truly
really
was.
Yeah.
So.
And some of the behind the scenes people were quite interesting. So I think it was it Pete Romano, I think, who I talked to, I think, who did part of the underwater units, was quite was a really interesting conversation. Karen Young was quite hard to track down. And when I did, she didn't really have much to say. I think she just it was just a job, and she just kind of moved on. And obviously we are at that point a good 35 years roughly removed from the film, so you can understand that maybe if they just want to move on. I always wanted to speak to Mario. Because I feel like now that he's done the Sharksploitation documentary as well that Steven Scarlatta did, that he probably would talk to. And I tried. I went through agents. I went through like people he'd worked with, writers, directors, the Producers Guilds, the Actors Guilds, the Directors Guilds. And to this day, still nothing. Lynn.
It's not you. I tried. I tried for 6 months to get him to come to SharkCon, and talking to his agent every week.
Yeah.
And I said, here's this. I just need a yes or no. Okay, I'll ask him. And then the next week, I haven't talked to him yet. Yeah, I don't know if he, maybe the agent doesn't think it's something he wants to talk about. But I interviewed him and his son Mandela a few years ago for a film they did together, and just off topic, we talked about Jaws Revenge, and he was very friendly about it and told some fun stories. And so I don't think he's as reluctant to talk about it as maybe his representatives think he is. But come January, I'll start working on him again.
Yeah, I mean the thing is as well, like if you got him in the space to talk about it, like in that almost like, even if it was like on a panel, like at a convention or whatever, it would go down an absolute storm, because he's really charismatic, as just as a person, never mind as an actor. He's done some really good work over the years.
Oh, definitely.
So I think he'd be really good. And even from like when I spoke to Lance had some really nice stories about him, like of working together, because obviously they do spend a lot of time together, in terms of the scenes that they shot together. It's a big part of the film, because I mean, if we're looking at comparisons, they're almost like this hybrid cosplay of Hooper and Quint to a point.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think it wonder if it's almost like they think that you're going to mock them, or you're going to not be kind to them. Because Nate and I spent some time with Lance last year.
Last summer, yeah.
And he was super friendly. And,
he really was. Great guy.
He was willing to do a Jaws the Revenge panel and show the movie and just stop it at certain scenes, and he was going to comment on it. So yeah. And we tried to get Mitchell too. I thought Mitchell was going to come, but he decided not to. And Karen Young bailed. She didn't show any interest in it. But yeah.
But Lance, who was a wonderful guy to talk to, he really was great guy. Said, admittedly, Mike, he said, "I know I'm the redheaded stepchild of the Jaws world." You know what I mean? And so, unfortunately, I think he carries that weight, and so that's kind of what maybe what dwells in the back of his mind. But what a wonderful person to sit and talk to. What a great guy. Really, yeah.
But you're also the last starfighter, so there's no.
Yeah. I was going to say, how you. He worked with Robert Preston. How can you?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And we do have a question on here. Paul, would you be as big of a Jaws the Revenge fan if you had seen Jaws 2 and 3 first?
Good question.
Dun, dun, dun.
I think maybe less in terms of like, I think I would go 1, 2 immediately in terms of my, like I was going to do like a rankings from first watching, because I remember first watching Jaws 2 and just being like, kind of like, I was like, wow, where has this been all my life? Kind of thing, this cheesy sequel that, has got like, Scarface shark, and it's basically like a slasher film, I think, like in terms of the format of it.
Oh, sure.
So I think if I would have seen that one first, I think I probably would have thought less of Jaws the Revenge, but I still rank Jaws the Revenge higher than 3. I can watch it, I can enjoy parts of it, but it feels a little bit removed from that world, and I don't know if it's just me being a stickler or whatever. Maybe it's old age.
He said old age. Yeah. I'm not even going to ask about it.
Well,
wait a minute.
Well, and to be honest with you, exactly with what you're saying, when we look at things like this, I mean, it falls right into place. So here you are once again. You're harking back to the environment. So here you are, you're sitting in a house that is overlooking the beach, right where the Edgartown Lighthouse is. So you're right back in that area, and you're right back to people that you've been able to identify with from the first film all the way up through. And so it ties, there's, we have, I mean, everyone except for his daughter in that picture, everyone that's there and you're familiar with them. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
And that's the weird thing is that, and I may be talking about my backside there, but I swear that the first time I watched that film, I recognized Mrs. Kittner right away. And again, it was that little bit of connective tissue that it kind of goes a little bit unspoken. Then obviously years later you realize it's Mrs. Taft, isn't it? I believe. And in the novelization, Mrs. Taft and Alan Brody run a business together. They run a real estate business, and there's a split-second shot in Jaws the Revenge as they're walking out of, I think it is the office, and you see a sign, and I think it does say it's something like Brody and Taft or something like that. It's called.
Oh, really? I'm going to have to look for that. Wow, that's a good fact. Wow.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but
that's a Paul's facts. Yeah.
I was going to say that's a Paul.
Is that, you mean in the very beginning?
Wow,
yes.
I've got to look for that.
So that must be where Donna was walking.
That'd be the same scene.
So
I'm going to have to look for that. Wow.
Yeah, there's an office, and it isn't the police office. It's when Sean and his wife to be Tiffany and Ellen are walking, and they're talking about getting the Christmas tree and doing the Christmas and doing it right.
Right.
They're walking out of what is assumed to be their office space. It's Alan basically knocking off for Christmas, essentially.
Okay, that's it. Everybody's going to want you realize everybody's hitting YouTube after this, right?
I'm going back tonight and watching that. Paul,
if I'm wrong, they can come after me. It's fine.
No, they won't.
You're watching this on YouTube. Pause quickly.
Yeah, just pause it and screenshot it. Send it to
I'm going to be. Yeah, that's a great fact. I'm going to be looking for that. Wow.
But that is in the novelization as well. So that's kind of like, it's part of, like, again, it's that connective tissue of, like, Alan is embedded in this community, the small community of Amity that basically hasn't really changed that much in the past 12, 15 years since the first film.
And if you think about this, remember, she's the one that asked Taft in the first, when do I become an Islander? And they told her, never. And now look what's happened. Now she is one.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that picture as well is that the one where you've got like Mrs. Taft, Mrs. Kittner, and obviously with Thea, is to me, and it might just be me reading too much into it, is that it's almost like a full circle moment because Alan is grieving, and obviously in the first film, Mrs. Kittner is grieving and obviously has that, she slaps Brody, but then it comes full circle that the fact that these families have come together in this really, once again, this really tragic circumstances.
Yeah.
But that's the connection. Yeah. So that's
absolutely the connection. Yeah.
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 Funny, Mrs. Kittner went to the house afterwards and Ellen opened the door and goes, "Welcome to the club."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to smack me?
Yeah. Well, not to spoil anything, but I was I heard about a project. It was done by James Michael Roddy. He's doing some stories about he wants to do some short stories about Jaws, basically, and get submissions. And I am writing one at the moment, but it is actually going to be about Mrs. Kittner. So it's going to be
really.
So it's kind of like it's a commentary on trauma. So it's not going to be a very nice read, but it's going to be basically her between Jaws and Jaws the Revenge. That almost like
No
that bridging gap.
kidding.
So I am. This might give me an impetus to finish it because I got halfway and then I stopped and I got waylaid. But I've got an idea of where I want to go with it. But I kind of like I want to basically see it as this that by the time she gets to that point when she's with Alan and obviously grieving with Sean, that she's accepted her son's death. She realizes it's not Martin's fault, and obviously she's kind of gone through the stages of grief. And I just thought that might be quite a unique story to tell because basically what he wants to do is he wants to tell these different stories of people in Amity almost. And I just thought her story would be quite interesting. So I've used a bit of creative licensing. I've filled in a few blanks about what a husband does and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I hope, and it may never get published anyway. That's fine with me. But it was just really nice to kind of meditate on that. I think just to kind of almost like fill in that gap up until Revenge.
You never know.
Very-
You never know if it'll
very
be picked up
interesting,
because you never know. I mean, look, they have the comic book with Deputy Hendricks, so you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
One or two comments here before we move in. One said poor Judith. Yeah, rip. So
Yeah.
a very tragic story.
Yeah,
with
There's
what
a
happened
sad.
to her.
I have a sad story about that. But
Yeah, she was
Oh,
very
wow.
much a rising star, just starting to find her own as a child actor, let alone an adult actor. Yeah, and then we have our good buddy John from Scotland is joining us. So he's coming in, made it just in time. Oh, it's been a great show. It's been a great show, John. So yeah, very much so. Absolutely.
Yeah, just touching on Judith as well. I mean, from when I was putting the book together, I mean, there's a lot of information about what happened,
Yeah.
and it was quite hard to write really because obviously you're talking about it's obviously unfortunately people out there die in tragic circumstances quite regularly, but when it's a child it just hits that little bit harder. And the fact that obviously with the parent involved and all this kind of stuff and then the negligence that went on in the lead up to what happened and obviously in the aftermath,
Sure.
it wasn't very pleasant to write about, but I felt like it was part of the story. So obviously, some parts are good, some parts are bad. That was not very pleasant at all. And I think if I'm right in saying Lance Guest was one of the pallbearers at a funeral actually as well.
Yeah, I believe. I mean, you would know more than I would, but yeah, I remember reading that. And the first blow was the fact that she was a child when she passed. The second blow was the fact that it involved a parent. That's what really, I think makes it hard to comprehend. What actually happened there. Yeah. All right. Well, moving on, we keep harking back to the connection with the movies and with the people, and Ellen, who really took on the main role in this film. I think this is one of the best shots of the entire film. I really do. And there's some other things that were done really well. The underwater scene, like in the in the old sunken ship. But when Ellen has a nightmare, and she has a nightmare that she is being attacked by the shark, I want to tell you what, and it wasn't as graphic as Sean's attack or some of the other things that we noticed. It was just done so well. It was shot so well. The perspective of it, and it was almost hark back to like maybe like Jaws, where it was like less is more. Like you really don't see much of what's going on. You just kind of catch little glimpses. So let me pull that up for us here real quick, if you don't mind. Pull that up. I just thought that shot was just done so well. You caught little glimpses of the shark, little glimpses of blood in the water, and that was it. You didn't get the big reveal. You didn't. It was the suspense of that shot. I just thought it was incredibly well done. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think as well. I think I touched on it before we came on. Is that basically that was the clip that they used to promote the film on the BBC in the UK when they were going to show Jaws: The Revenge. That was the clip that they always shown, so people always kind of knew it was coming to a point. Obviously not all of it. They just showed she was swimming, then she started swimming back, and obviously the music cues almost that there's going to be an attack. What's quite interesting is when you see that obviously they cut from here to like on the water level as well. So, and that's something that the Reef did quite well, obviously a few years back, is that you feel like you're on the water because you're at that level. So you're almost at like head. It's almost like your head's in the water. You're like up to head level. So, and that is, you realize at that point that when you're in water, you can't see underneath you or in front of you unless obviously you see a fin or whatever, but the attack is going to come from underneath, and that's what makes it work. And again, it's that extension of the parts that really work for me for like probably the first hour or so of the film is the PTSD element to it, and that is probably one of the better parts of it. There's that, and then there's another part earlier in the film. I think when she's on the barge that takes the car over from the island to, I'm guessing, the mainland, and she's she picks up Thea and she starts laughing, and then in a moment she's crying, and to me, and again it might be me reading too much into it, is that's kind of like your stages of grief, is that you can be happy one minute because you get a happy memory or whatever of somebody, and then the next minute something just completely sweeps you off your feet and you're a mess. And that worked for me, and I think that's an extension of it because she's carrying that, not guilt, just that trauma with her, and it manifests itself obviously with the shark essentially.
Yeah, and it's a very sudden breakdown. You're right. She literally goes from happy and laughter to boom, like the complete opposite end of things. Yeah.
And again earlier on, like when they first come to town, it's just post when they're with Mrs. Kittner and that, and she's on about making some fettuccine, and she knocks the pans over her because she's so flustered that she wants to. It's a bit like and I was kind of put like a slight personal stance on it, is that when we lost one of my grandparents when I was probably about 14, 15, and when one of my parents really tried to put like a real brave face on it, because obviously as children, you don't really understand. You do understand to a point, obviously, like death and all that kind of stuff. But you can see the parents are almost like cracking under the pressure because they've got to stay strong for like the family.
Exactly. That's what I was just about to say. They're the strong one in the family.
Yeah.
To carry it. Yeah.
But obviously in this case, she's staying strong because obviously you've got a young child there, but at the same point you've got a brother who's grieving a brother. Correct. Essentially, which is something that's must be really hard to comprehend, especially it's the old adage, isn't it, that a child should never die before a parent. I can't remember what the phrase is, but it's something like that.
Never outlive your children. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. It's that, and there's just these little examples of it. And obviously, like I say, it goes off the rails a bit later on with what happens, but them moments are the ones that really work for me, and that attack scene is a great example of that, because it's like, what does she do? How she's still in this grieving stage, that could last months, it could last years, we don't know. And obviously getting away from the area that it happened still isn't taking away this trauma essentially, but obviously it's still a fresh trauma. So there you go.
Yeah, the weight that she carries. Yeah. There's a question on here for you. It says, do you find yourself having to defend Jaws: The Revenge constantly to naysayers?
No, because at the end of the day, we've all got our opinions of the film. Right. I just I will talk about the merits, and I'm fully in the conversation of it's not a perfect film. It's not this this classic film. It's fun. I find it quite fun in the sense that I can watch it and I can always enjoy it. And obviously knowing little bits of the behind the scenes sometimes improves certain scenes for me, you know. I don't. It'd be like defending. If I did that, then what, you know? Just, it would be exhausted, wouldn't it? Let's face it, because it's easy prey. It is easy prey. Like so many other films that, you know, that consider like bad films, is that you can listen to a million podcasts where someone will spend an hour and a half just completely trashing the film without looking at things through an analytical sense, or, you know, or looking at production and looking at the reasons maybe why things went wrong, but just being like, oh, this is trash, this is rubbish, and it's there's nothing, there's no film criticism there for me.
Sure.
And that's not to be a snob about it. It's just I don't really see what I would gain out of it and what they would gain out of it. Because if I just said, oh yeah, I think it's a crap film, then the conversation ends, doesn't it? Because it's not a conversation.
Sure.
It's a statement. So it's not. It's like it's a statement to a statement. So life's too short for that.
Agreed. You wonder half the time if it's simply someone trying to get a rise out of you, as opposed to having a valid argument. So there is a difference there. Yeah.
You get the odd person on the Facebook page where they'll say, "Oh, it's the," and sometimes I do comment back and they say, "Oh, Jaws Revenge is the worst film ever made." And I said, "Well, I think you're probably on the wrong page, then, aren't you? Because if you are, what's the point in commenting on a Jaws the Revenge like shark, you know, books page? If you hate the film, it just seems a bit redundant, really. It's like, because it's meant to be for like people who,
because they have nothing better to do.
Yeah,
right.
so whatever, you know. Yeah. What can you do? You can't please everyone, can you?
True.
No.
Well, one of the things that was always fascinating to me, and harking back to this image, is I can remember as a kid watching this, or teenager or whatever, watching this, and Mario Van Peebles gets eaten and dies. Like, I specifically remember watching it when it came over HBO every time, and then it changed, and then same with the ending. And I think the ending changed, and that has ties to, I think the UK audience saw the original. I think maybe I'm getting this backwards. I would assume you know way more than I do about this. That it was shown in the UK, and UK audience was not happy with the ending, and so they got so like Lance and those guys got called back to reshoot the ending, and so you had two different versions of Mario Van Peebles. One, he dies, one he doesn't, and then two different versions at the end. One, the shark explodes, and the other one, the shark just gets stabbed and then dies off. Can you kind of give us any information on it?
Well, I think the my understanding is that the UK cinema release had the original ending, and then it was switched. Okay. And to my understanding around the whole Jake living is that basically test audiences responded to Jake as a character, and that caused them to do the rethink, and they convinced Sid to basically front some money. Joe Sargent wanted to film in Malibu because he lived in Malibu. So did Mario Van Peebles apparently at the time. They put the kibosh on that because it was easier to just go back into the Universal tank. And obviously they were still tweaking things with the film in cinemas. So I think there might have been a bit of crossover in terms of what people initially saw to what they. I mean, the first ending that I ever saw was the one where Jake lives. And you know, as ludicrous as it is, that was the first one that was put onto the screening that I'd seen on the television at the time. And then the other ending was always like the alternative ending, ended up being on like the DVD years later and the Blu-ray and the like.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the thing around the exploding shark, it was always the exploding shark for many years, and I'd only seen in probably the past 10, 15 years the original miniature model, which was created by I think it was the guys who worked on Jaws 3, I think, if I remember right, initially, and their work was kind of, Joe Sargent hated the miniatures, and they don't tend to be used very much in shot, but obviously for that one, they decided for some reason to use it, and, you know, obviously people constantly freeze frame it and say, you know, it doesn't look great, obviously with the blood, you know, kind of on its mouth, and it looks really really fake. Whereas the other part, you see the shark's head like moving around, and I know it's roaring, obviously, but obviously the blood's coming out of its mouth, and then it obviously sinks to the bottom. Which obviously is, I mean, I don't know whether they were riffing on the original end of Jaws with obviously the shark drowns in the book, but whether that was, or whether maybe again I'm overthinking it.
Sure.
Well, I always thought the last end of Jaws Revenge, that scene was from Jaws. I could be wrong.
When you see the carcass drifting down,
I
I thought so too. Now that you say that, yeah.
Yeah, because I need to watch it again.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna watch it
Everybody's
now.
homework this weekend is to watch Jaws Revenge again.
We're gonna
Everybody
look for the
watch it at
names
the
on the
same
sign,
time.
and Paul's gonna look for the ending with the shark carcass.
Yeah, I'm sure it just goes down to the bottom there, if I remember right, with the bowsprit in its side. Whereas I think in the first one, it kind of obviously you hear that kind of noise, don't you? See the fin and
You hear
the
the
blood.
roar? Yeah.
Yeah, and you do hear the roar. Yeah, you hear the roar.
we do have a question and a request. So we have a request saying, Paul, tell us some good Jaws Revenge trivia. Because obviously you're going to be much more of an authority on this than the rest of us. So is there any like real crazy
realty thing?
Yeah, is there any real crazy like information or facts you came across when you were doing your research for the book?
I think. Do you want to go first? Just in case.
You're the guest. You go ahead.
It's fine. I think one of the most interesting ones that I found was when I spoke to Lance Guesters, that basically Michael Caine saved his life on set. That was an interesting one. So the scene where Michael and Jake are going out in the little speedboat to try and get Alan after Dia's attack with the banana boat, and they run into Hoagie. So basically, there's I'm not sure the ins and outs of what happened, but basically, Lance Guester basically slipped overboard near the boat propeller, and it was on. And luckily, in the nick of time, Michael Caine pulled him out the water to save him, basically getting himself eviscerated by a boat propeller. So his kind of one of his stories is that Michael Caine saved my life on the set of Jaws: The Revenge.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Wow.
What you got? Come on.
Not like that. Not a big deal, but that's pretty damn impressive. Okay. So I remember our dear friend Donna, who lives on Martha's Vineyard. She was an extra in Jaws: Revenge, and she was one of the ladies walking by in that scene that we're talking about with the realty sign. But apparently, her clothes that she wears in that was not her clothes. Apparently, it was the director's wife. So the hat that you see on her is actually the director's wife's clothing, the jacket and fur hat that she had on, because they were filming in winter, I believe. So she's like, they just gave me to wear, and I went on set.
Yeah, I think they were filming. Yeah, they were filming towards, I think it was the end of January. They did.
January,
I think it was like
so it was still cold. Yeah,
5-day stretch. So that snow, I think you see, is real snow. Real
snow.
So there's no
Wow.
no set dressing there.
Yeah,
sure,
Donna, I played it for my mom. We were on the vineyard, and I played it for my mom and my two nieces. And I said, well, Donna's coming over to visit, and it was right. She says, yeah, that's not my hat. That's Joe Sargent's wife's hat. That's not mine. I'm like, did you keep it? She's like, no, I had to give it back. I'm like, Donna's the queen.
Another interesting one was when they were back filming on the Universal. Like in the tank, basically, is Mario Van Peebles and Lance Guest ended up hopping on one of the tours one day just for a laugh, basically. So they were going around in the cart. So basically, Mario thought it'd be a really good idea to basically prank these people, and obviously they were all they're in their costumes or whatever else, obviously potentially soaking wet, and just hopped on one of the as they were driving around near the trams, basically. And Mario as well. Mario had quite a bit of difficulty with the Nassau Tourism Board. So basically, because and it's no big secret that obviously his accent is a choice, but also the dreadlocks are a choice. The Nassau Tourism Board were quite concerned that he would have been projecting a negative image of the Bahamas on people with this character. and
Oh,
they
really?
basically had to talk the tourism board round. I don't know whether they paid them off or not, just to basically make sure that Jake could be Jake, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah.
His father did the.
Her father
his
was
father
he was in
there
it too, yeah.
and had the
Yeah,
same
Melvin.
accent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's continuity, isn't it? And I did before he passed. Actually, I did ask about Melvin, but he was quite far along. I think he had Alzheimer's towards the end, and when I spoke to his representative, they just said it wasn't really going to work in the sense of because you're not really going to get much out of him at this stage, which is a shame. Yeah, and then, and I think he passed a couple of years later, so it's real shame. But again, another really talented actor as well, and obviously I think they worked together on a few projects over the years.
Well, we have a comment on here, and to be honest with you, I have an addition to go along with this comment because it started to make me think about the whole character of Jake and how you said, really he kind of identifies as like the Hooper of Jaws: The Revenge. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. So Robert said, couldn't we combine the original ending with the stabbing and then have Jake surviving? So I'm gonna add on to that. What if the next Jaws film involved Jake and Hooper, the two scientists?
Oh.
Like remove the whole, shark hunter, remove the whatever. Just have the scientists go after it. Would that be an interesting take? I don't know.
Hooper's going to hate Jake. Hooper's going to hate Jake.
I know. Yeah. Okay, who would you root for?
But if you think about it, though, in most of these films, you had characters that were complete opposites of one another. So think about that. Quint and Hooper hated each other. Just put this into perspective. Mike wasn't a big fan of Hoagie, and so
well, lots of reasons.
Sure, true. Couple of reasons there, right?
You, sir, just opened
well,
the door
not pointing out the obvious here. So yeah, there is a question here for you, Val. Were all the opening scenes filmed on Martha's Vineyard?
I think that there's a little bit of Sean's attack that is in the tank because the boat does sink in the tank, which is one of the Mitchell stories from the set. But yeah, I think the majority of that Edgar town, I think it's a 5 or 6 day window where they so all the street scenes, the funeral of Sean, the beach and all that kind of stuff at the houses, that's all Edgar town. Because all the people who were in the funeral scene, I think they're just like townsfolk. And again, when they did the casting call, the majority of all them people, obviously, like say with Donna, because Donna was one of the people that I spoke to, there was big casting calls. They really went to town in terms of like recharming like the Edgar town community again to get involved in it, because obviously again it's probably a money saver for them, but at the same time obviously it gets the community involved, and if the community is engaged, it's good for like local economy and all that kind of stuff. They did like screenings of the film and that, and even Donna said that when they did the screening of the film there, it was packed out. Absolutely packed out because everybody wanted to see themselves in film, because they could almost could be like, oh, that's me there, and that's me in that scene, and that's really nice in the sense that it's this big film. Let's face it, it's a big Universal Pictures film, but it's got all these people in from this small seaside town. It's great in that sense. Yeah.
You put on your resume, you worked with Michael Caine.
Exactly.
That's true. There you go.
Years ago in Maryland, Ian McKellen was doing his one-man show, and afterwards they invited some people up to do a scene with him, and I was one of them. So after that, my resume includes that I did acting Shakespeare with Ian McKellen. So
wow.
And what did you do, per se?
I just reacted to something he said, forsooth.
Well, you didn't. What Shakespeare was it? I'm curious now.
He was just talking about the plays, and talking Shakespeare and acting. Basically, it was an acting workshop that you paid money to attend.
So you didn't go around and go an et tu brute?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I would not.
I'm impressed.
I would not
I'm
have been
always impressed with you.
he would have been seasoned. He would have said it.
Okay, but
I would have been like, Cassius or one of the lesser senators.
But did you wear a toga? No, I'm kidding.
I did in the 70s. That's another story for another show.
That sounds like another T-shirt to me, and I've got one with you on it already.
Another story for another show.
Well, we are rounding in on about an hour and 20 minutes here. Not that I'm trying to lock anything down, but Paul, before we go any further, I do want to kind of let people at home know. So if we want to get a hold of your book, how do we get a hold of it?
So I think it's available in the usual place in terms of like Amazon. So I think there's a paperback, hardback, and ebook format. The publisher's Bear Manor Media, so they publish through their website. So if you do want the ebook version, it's a bit cheaper on there. I think for like Americans, it's about $7 or $8, something like that. So that's the ebook version, and then obviously they do sell the hardback and paperback versions as well. So yeah, I think they're the main place really, and they're usually where most people will probably look for the books, whether it's the publisher or Amazon are usually like their main kind of outlets. We did look actually trying to get it into some the bookshops in Edgartown, and I think, and is there a museum there? I believe. I think I did ask the question, yes. And I don't know how far it got, because it's a little bit. It was me asking as the author, whereas it has to come from the publisher, so it's probably just one where me and the publisher just need to have a conversation about it. So it'd just be nice, because obviously again, I am like say Donna's in the book where I interviewed her. She was lovely, and again provided that real grounded research and information that really helped to kind of show the full breadth of the project, because it's not just the Hollywood higher ups, it's everything that kind of goes with it, that really recaptured the imagination of having Jaws back in Edgartown, because that was the big thing, especially with the early publicity. It was Jaws is coming back to Edgartown, whereas obviously I think Jaws 2, I'm not sure if there was any filming in Edgartown, or whether it was fairly minimal. Mike would know better than me.
Paul, I'll send you. I'll message you email information for Edgartown Books. I know Matt. I'm sure Matt would like to carry it, because he carries my book, Edith Blake book, Matt Taylor's book, Joe Allen's book. He just literally has a Jaws section.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to get copies sent over, and that I'm sure we can arrange something.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have a little tradition here when we kind of wrap things up for the night. We do two things. And one, we do what we call, instead of saying goodbye, we do a fins up here, and then what we do is we let Quint take us out with his farewell and adieu. However, I thought, Paul, in honor of you and in honor of Jaws: The Revenge tonight, instead of having Quint take us out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some footage, and some of you guys have seen this, some of you have not. Where someone took some footage from Jaws: The Revenge and reshot it, but with a CGI shark to kind of update the shark look. Do you know what I'm talking about, Paul?
Yeah,
I have seen that footage. Yeah, it's really interesting. It actually
great.
In terms of that scene, because that scene actually does feature my favorite shot of the film, actually, and it's the when Michael's being chased around the sunken ship. It's the silhouette of the shark going above him, and it basically almost blocks out the sun. That's my favorite shot of the film.
Great shot. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Great, because it really kind of gets the scale of like the shadow, and it's like the silhouette, isn't it? But obviously of this really slow moving fish, very big fish at the same time. But it was like, because the music just cues just right. I think it is, Michael, because I love Michael Small's score. I think it's fantastic. I think it's it's Williams, Michael Small, Jaws 2, Jaws 3 themes. That's one hell I will die, and I love it. I think it's brilliant. But yeah, that shot's the one.
Very nice. We do have John chiming in saying, glad I was able to catch up at the end of tonight's show, guys. Looking forward to watching the rest back. Hope you all tune in. My short film of youth. That's right. His show debut is tomorrow. Yeah, so very nice, John. Thank you, guys. want to thank everyone at home for joining us tonight. And so I'm going to pull this clip up, and I'm just going to take us away and let probably like a minute and a half, 2 minutes of this clip run, and this will be what takes us out tonight. So I want to thank you guys at home for joining in tonight. Paul, really want to thank you for not only coming on, but staying up very, very late tonight to do so, and and give us a really interesting perspective and your intel on the revenge, because it's something that doesn't come up a whole lot. So that's great. Yeah, great conversation tonight, buddy. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, and it's been really good to speak to all you guys. You fountains of knowledge, and the questions have been great. It's just been a lot of fun, really, more than anything. I don't feel like I've been grilled too hard.
No, we wouldn't do that. So absolutely not.
We'll redo that, okay?
First,
we'll make it rougher the next time.
Yeah, we're easy the first time.
Yeah.
You make you want to come back. You make you want to come back.
Gonna have to do that expanded edition now, aren't I? Oh,
All right, guys. Thank you very much. And everyone home, we'll let this take us out. And you guys have a wonderful, wonderful week. And we will be back next week with a very interesting topic next week. I'm not going to give it any lead-ins, but it has to do with yet another book pertaining to Jaws. So thank you very much, guys. Have yourselves a wonderful, and we'll let this take us out. All right, here we go.
Shit! Jake! Michael! 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 Michael, what's going on? Michael, can you hear me? Michael! Michael, can you hear me? Michael!
Here it is.
Yeah, that's it. It's a good shot.
Get the bang sticks, we're going down. Bang sticks are no good, man. Going down, all of us.